truth, discipline, and power. The path to becoming unbreakable. The morning sun had barely risen over the small mountain village when Arin tied his worn boots and looked up toward the mist-covered trail. The mountain had always been there, towering, silent, and indifferent. To most, it was just a place of beauty. But for Arin, it was a test. He had come to this village 6 months ago, running away from a life that felt broken. Failed ambitions, strained relationships, and a mind filled with noise. Back in the city, he had been a man who spoke loudly about success but quietly ignored the discipline it demanded. Every time life challenged him, he ran from his goals, his responsibilities, and most painfully, from himself. But on the mountain, there was nowhere to run. The teacher in silence, Arin, lived in a small hut near the temple, under the guidance of an old monk named Master Kayan. The villagers said Kayan had once been a warrior, but he never spoke of it. His days were quiet. Meditation at dawn, chores at noon, silence by dusk. At first, Arin thought the routine was unbearable. There was no noise, no distractions, just him and his thoughts. "Master," he asked one morning as they gathered water from the stream, "how long must I stay here to find peace?" Kayan looked at him and smiled faintly. "Peace is not something you find," he said. "It's something you become. But only when you stop lying to yourself." Arin frowned. "Lying to myself? About what?" "About who you are," Kayan said, "and who you could be, if you were disciplined enough to bridge that gap." The mirror of truth that night, Arin couldn't sleep. He stared at his reflection in the window's dim light. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had avoided for years. What if the problem isn't the world but me? He thought about his broken promises to his family, his friends, and himself. The half-finished projects, the excuses, the resentment toward others who had succeeded while he had not. Beneath all of it, he saw the same truth. He lacked discipline. He wanted results, not effort. Comfort, not growth. Recognition, not truth. That realization hit him harder than any mountain storm. And for the first time, Arin cried, not out of weakness, but because he finally stopped pretending. The discipline of the dawn. The next morning, he began his new practice. He rose before dawn, meditated despite the cold, and trained his body through exhaustion. The work was simple: fetching wood, cleaning the temple grounds, carrying water. But Arin treated each task as a vow to himself. Days turned into weeks, and his mind began to change. He learned that discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. The more he mastered his habits, the less he was ruled by impulse. The mountain didn't get easier, but his endurance grew. Still, Master Kayan gave no praise. One morning, Arin asked, "Have I become disciplined now?" Kayan smiled gently. "Discipline isn't a thing you become. It's something you practice every day, especially when no one sees you doing it." Then he added, "The moment you believe you are disciplined is the moment you stop being so." The temptation. Months later, word reached the village of a trading caravan heading down from the city. One of the merchants recognized Arin. "You're Arin Vale, aren't you?" he asked. "I heard your old company's struggling." "They're hiring again. You could return, start over." "You're wasting your talent up here." That night, Arin's thoughts raced. A chance to return, to reclaim what he'd lost. But as he stared into the quiet darkness of the mountain, he realized something. He wasn't the same man who had come here. Back then, he sought to prove his worth to the world. Now he sought to prove his worth to himself. The city would tempt him with noise, comfort, and ego, but he had just begun to hear the voice of truth inside him. In the morning, he told Master Kayan about the offer. The old monk listened and said only, "You may go if you wish. But remember, a man who has not mastered his mind will lose himself anywhere." Arin stayed. The trial of storms. That winter, the mountain was struck by a fierce storm. The winds tore through the trees, and a landslide buried part of the village path. Kayan and Arin worked for days to clear the way. On the fourth day, Kayan slipped and injured his leg. The villagers urged Arin to wait for help, but the path was blocked and the snow kept falling. Arin looked at the mountain's sheer face. It would take all night to climb over and reach the next village for medicine. He tied his rope, adjusted his pack, and began the climb. The storm battered him. The cold bit into his fingers. Several times he thought about turning back. His body screamed in protest, his lungs burned, and fear whispered, "You'll never make it." But then, through the chaos, He heard Kyan's words echo in his mind. Discipline is doing what is right, even when every part of you wants to quit. Step by step, he kept going until at last, through frozen breath and trembling hands, he reached the village and brought back help. The awakening, when Kyan recovered, he said nothing for many days. Then one morning, as they sat watching the sunrise, he spoke. You faced the storm not to save me, but to save the man within you. The one who would no longer run. That man is unbreakable. Arin bowed his head. I didn't feel unbreakable. I felt afraid, Kyan nodded. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the mastery of it. And that mastery comes from truth and discipline. The return 2 years later, Arin returned to the city, not as an escape, but as a test. The noise, the crowds, the endless distractions, all of it returned. But inside, he was still. He found work again, though in a different way. Instead of chasing recognition, he began mentoring young people, teaching them the lessons he had learned, that truth without discipline is hollow, and discipline without truth is blind. He taught them to build strength from within, to speak honestly, act consistently, and stand firm even when no one else believed in them. People began to notice something different about him. There was a quiet power in his presence, not the arrogance of confidence, but the calm of conviction. The lesson years passed. Arin often returned to the mountain to visit Master Kyan. One day, he found the old monk sitting by the temple gate, watching the horizon. Master, Arin said softly, how do you know when a man has truly become unbreakable? Kyan smiled. When he no longer needs to prove that he is. Then, with a faint chuckle, he added, truth is not loud, discipline is not comfortable, and power is not what the world tells you it is. But when all three live within you, you become free. The path forward, as Arin walked back down the trail that evening, he understood. Truth had shown him who he was. Discipline had built the bridge to who he could be. And power, real power, was not about control over others, but mastery over himself. He realized that life would continue to test him. The storms would return, the doubts would whisper, and the world would always tempt him to forget the mountain. But he no longer feared breaking. For he had learned that being unbreakable doesn't mean being untouched by hardship. It means rising, every single time stronger than before. Epilogue: The Mountain. Within years later, the villagers told stories about the man who had once trained under Master Kyan. They said he built schools, helped orphans, and taught that peace wasn't found in temples or wealth. It was forged through truth, discipline, and courage. One inscription remained carved into the stone at the temple gate, written by Arin before he left for the last time. Do not seek strength in what the world can give you. Seek strength in what the world cannot take away. And beneath it, 3 simple words: truth, discipline, power. That was the path he walked, the path that made him unbreakable. Final message: becoming unbreakable is not about never falling. It's about never lying to yourself when you do. It's about facing your fears, honoring your promises, and choosing discipline when comfort calls your name. When truth guides your actions, discipline shapes your habits, and inner power fuels your purpose, you no longer chase strength. You become it.